The Founding Fathers wrote the Articles of Confederation to create a new government. The Articles were the basic rules to hold the states together. However, they realized that this system did not work because each state worked independently. In 1787, state representatives met to change the Articles. That meeting was called the Constitutional Convention. There, the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution to create a more balanced federal government. Not everyone agreed on the changes, so three leaders, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, wrote the Federalist Papers to support the passing of the Constitution. The Federalist Papers were a collection of essays written to persuade the people of the states to adopt the Constitution. By 1789, all 13 states agreed to adopt the Constitution, and the new government began operating in March of 1789. Benjamin Franklin is another important person from early American history. He was the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention. Franklin also served as a U.S. diplomat to Europe, opened the first free public library, and served as the first Postmaster General. Once the Constitution was formally adopted, it became the supreme law of the land. This means that all U.S. laws must follow the Constitution. Under the Constitution, everyone must follow the rule of law. This means that everyone must follow the law. Leaders must obey the law. Government must obey the law. And ultimately, no one is above the law. The first three words of the Constitution are, "We, the people." In other words, the American people govern themselves and are not ruled by a king. This idea of self-government is an important part of the Constitution. The Constitution explains how the government is set up. It defines the three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Beyond describing the setup of the government, the Constitution provides information on the rights of all people living in America. The Founding Fathers believed that the Constitution should be a living document. For that reason, the Constitution can be changed or amended. Changes to the Constitution are called amendments. In fact, it was not long after the Constitution was written that the Founding Fathers wrote the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, about the basic rights of all people living in America. These first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment protects the freedom of speech. People are free to discuss issues openly and have debates about public policies. Beyond free speech, the First Amendment protects freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and freedom to petition the government. To date, there have been 27 amendments to the Constitution. Several of these have provided important changes to voting laws and the rights of all Americans. In creating this new government, the Founding Fathers wanted to be sure to make the government balanced. This means they did not want any one part of the government to get too powerful. To do this, they set up a system of checks and balances. These checks and balances were created so that no branch of government would be too powerful. A good example of this is in the making of new laws. Both the House of Representatives and the Senate debate and vote on a proposed new law. This proposed law is referred to as a bill. When a bill is approved by Congress, it then goes on to the President. The President can sign the bill, making it a law, or he can veto the bill. This means he does not approve of the bill. These laws can then be reviewed by the judicial branch, in the Supreme Court, to determine if these laws follow the Constitution. If they do not obey the Constitution, the law can be repealed. This means that the law is not in effect anymore. Another important way the Founding Fathers created a separation of power was by dividing some powers between the federal government and state governments. Things that affect the whole country, like the printing of money, the establishment of an army, a declaration of war, or signing peace treaties with other governments, can only be done by the federal government. But some laws and powers vary from state to state. Each state can issue its own driver's licenses, provide schooling and education, provide for public safety with fire departments, provide protection for citizens with police departments, or approve zoning and land use. These are all things that each state has the power to do on their own.
Wow. That was a lot of information in this lesson.
Yeah, it sure was. And there are a lot of civics test questions from this lesson. Would you be willing to lead us in a review of all the civics test questions that are covered in this lesson on the Constitution?
Sure. I'd be happy to do a review. Let's review those civics test questions. What happened at the Constitutional Convention? The Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. When was the Constitution written? 1787. The Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution. Name one of the writers. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, or John Jay. What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? U.S. diplomat, oldest member of the Constitutional Convention, first Postmaster General of the U.S., start of the first free library. What is the supreme law of the land? The Constitution. What does the Constitution do? Sets up the government. Defines the government. Protects basic rights of Americans. The idea of self-government is in the first 3 words of the Constitution. What are these words? We, the people. What is an amendment? A change to the Constitution. An addition to the Constitution. How many amendments does the Constitution have? 27. What is the rule of law? It means that everyone must follow the law. Leaders must obey the law. Government must obey the law. No one is above the law. What do we call the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? The Bill of Rights. What is one right or freedom from the First Amendment? Speech, religion, assembly, press, petition the government. What is freedom of religion? You can practice any religion, or not practice a religion. What stops one branch of government from becoming too powerful? Checks and balances. Separation of powers. Under our Constitution, some powers belong to the federal government. What is one power of the federal government? To print money. To declare war. To create an army. To make treaties. Under our Constitution, some powers belong to the states. What is one power of the states? Provide schooling and education. Provide protection, police. Provide safety, fire departments. Give a driver's license. Approve zoning and land use.
You were right. That was a lot of information for one lesson.
You can come back to review this lesson anytime, or just review the questions using the flashcards. Thanks for coming for this lesson. Goodbye for now.